Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Potolicchio, and I'm the president of the Preparing Global Leaders Forum. And I have the honor tonight to be the moderator of the Aurora Dialogues Online. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone for coming to us from all corners of the world, both in the audience and also on the panel. We are joined by three public servant superstars that are right now based in Switzerland, Thailand, and South Africa. I especially want to thank the Future Studio Discussion Platform for making this event possible and starting this conversation tonight with us all. Before we start the conversation, just a quick reminder that we have Armenian translation available for the discussion here on Zoom. Those who need it should click interpretation in the meeting options and select the Portuguese language channel for Armenian. So if you need the translation, please select the Portuguese option so that you can have the Armenian translation. We have a fantastic interpreter with us tonight. Also, I want to remind our participants that you are welcome to send us your questions during the Q&A session, and our speakers will try to respond to the most urgent and frequently asked questions that are posed to them. So now it's my privilege to introduce you to tonight's panelists. We are joined by Monsignor Robert Vitillo, who is the Secretary General of the International Catholic Migration Commission. Before that, he served as the head of delegation of the Caritas International Foundation in Geneva. We have Dr. Cynthia Maung, who is the founder of the Mai Tai Clinic, trained as a medical doctor, and currently is serving over 95,000 clients with a staff of over 700 people. And we are also joined by Sister Priscilla Dlamini, who is the founder of the Holy Cross AIDS Hospice based in South Africa, where she oversees a staff of over 50 members and has a host of diplomas in fields ranging from midwifery to nursing to psychiatry. She is a true Renaissance woman. So really looking forward to our conversation today. And the very first question I want to pose to our panel, if we can start first with Dr. Cynthia, is why did you start a career in this nonprofit sector? Is this service vocation that you have? And what was the motivating impulse, right? Who are you and what do you stand for? So thank you, Dr. Cynthia.
Yes, I myself free from my country with my fellow protester when the military cracked down the pro-democracy protester in Burma. On our 7-day trekking journey to Thailand, we realized that we are not the only one who flee the country and military oppression. We met people whose families are killed or taken away, or whose villages are burned down by the military. They are displaced community in hiding from the military without adequate food, shelter, and among them are women, children, and people who are old and people who are sick. As a medical doctor, I witnessed the first humanitarian crisis of my life. My journey towards providing medical assistance to those in need started there. As we travel along the mountainous range, we start by the camps of the displaced community and provide medical care to all the medical equipments and supply packed in my backpack. As I arrived in the border town of Thailand, where our clinic located today, I witnessed many villages, and all those are malnourished children, people suffer from malaria, and women who are in need of emergency obstetric care services, and people injured by war. As a medical doctor, I respond with the support from the local leaders. The humanitarian spirits of the local leaders and my fellow groups motivate me to the best I can to alleviate the suffering around us. As my humanitarian journey reached 30 years, and Myanmar is steering toward a democratic country, the military oppression, human rights violation, and the protracted poverty in the country still drive people from Myanmar into Thailand and making the Myanmar refugees and migrants hesitant to go back to their home. Social injustice, inequality in accessing essential healthcare services, and statelessness are still prevalent in both sides of the border of Myanmar and Thailand. Our fight for social justice, equitable access to essential services, and dignity and safety for the community along the Thailand-Myanmar border will not win until the government and stakeholders take responsibility to make sure that everyone has access to their life-saving care and lead a dignified life. For this, we need empowerment, advocacy, and humanitarian spirit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia. Monsignor, if I could pose the same question to you, what was it that provided that engine and what motivated you to do what you're doing today?
Can you hear me?
Can hear you perfectly.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, my choice in life really revolved about my own church. I was very active even as a child in the local parish church where I grew up. And I saw the good that was done for people, both in need and also the kind of social gatherings as well as prayer gatherings that people engaged in. So I was very attracted to that kind of service since I benefited from it and saw others benefit from it. The rest of my career, I say either it's God's will or God's sense of humor, because I thought I was preparing to be a parish priest, and instead I was sent to work in a social service agency of the church, where in the area where I was ordained as a priest. And then later I was sent to work in Vatican City at the International Catholic Charities Office, and then later worked in national level in Washington, and then in Geneva. Now I run a global refugee and migration agency. So I never planned any of those things, but it's been a real privilege to do that. What motivated me, I would say, are the religious values that I grew up with. And I'm not sure that they're so distinctive only to the Catholic Church or to Christianity, because I think these values are common values that are shared by many religious traditions and by other people of goodwill who may not believe in have a faith affiliation.
Thank you, Monsignor. We have just lost Sister Priscilla, so I'm not skipping over her insightful remarks, and would like to direct the next question to Dr. Cynthia before we hear from the Monsignor, which is, during this pandemic, how has your work and the work of your organization been impacted? And what do you now have to do differently because of COVID-19? And are there adjustments that you think you're going to continually have to make in this post-pandemic world?
Yeah. Our patients, usually almost 50% are people crossing the border from Myanmar into Thailand. So we also refer our patients who require emergency obstetric care or ART treatment across the border, because our patients could not afford to pay for medical services in Thailand, and they don't have insurance. They are undocumented. So since 2012, we set up the referral system to access more advanced level care in Myanmar side. But during COVID period, travel restriction and the border closed down make them difficult for us to access to the higher level care. And since many of our patients doesn't have legal documents and insurance, and they are living in very isolated and remote area, so they are become more stigmatized. So they have to start reach out to the community who require medical assistance as well as food. But at the same time, it is also very important that we build a shared sense of purpose and urgency to protect our patients, our colleagues, and our facility and community. And while we are guiding young people to take action, we also emphasize on working as a team and identify and supporting each other's roles. And we see that many new leaders emerge to take courage, teamwork, and addressing the challenges. As a leader, it is important that we allow young people to take the leadership role in time of needs and to be confidently share their ideas, and while we providing support they need. So during the COVID-19 period, and now in Myanmar side also, the number of the new infection or the community transmission is increasing, but in Thailand is now almost stable. But every day we also have to continue enhance our capacity to do more screening, surveillance, And then we also provide like a isolation ward. And then we have to continue train our staff, especially our staff also have suffer from the family, worry about the family because they cannot go back to their family and crossing the border. So we have to encourage each other, but at the same time, we need to look at the way how can we improve the service through multi-sectoral collaboration.
Dr. Cynthia, if I could ask a follow-up question more on a psychological basis, given your medical training. One of the top experts in my country made a remark that after COVID has disappeared, he also hopes the handshakes and the hugs, the social contact may disappear because of the transmission of germs. And it got me thinking about whether or not there may be some psychological imprint. And given your work on a daily basis, I mean, you're seeing hundreds and hundreds of patients every day. Do you feel that there might be a long-lasting psychological impact that may make people a bit tentative about person-to-person contact, particularly with strangers and those that they have not had close relationships with before?
Actually, our patient or the community who are living in Thailand, mostly they are also displaced from their home country and they are discriminated. So they have been experiencing like abuses in the workplace, and then many of them undocumented, so they are always fear of arrest, deportation. But during the COVID period, we also have to reach out to our community network. But what we identified is until now, the school being closed for 6 months. So that in Thailand, the Thai school already open, but the Migrant Learning Center who are supporting the migrant children who cannot enroll in the formal education system, but there are almost 10,000 children who cannot go to the school. So we very much concerned about the children's psychology because they are also very vulnerable to be like a drop out from the school, as well as the family doesn't have enough food. So our teachers, we also work with many teachers in the Migrant Learning Center. So the teachers have to continue train how to work, how to do the home-based education, as well as how to reach out to the children and the providing care and support, psychological support to the family. So we have to do a lot of community network and reach out to the community while in this crisis period.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Monsignor, what about your organization's work and what COVID, the impact that it's had on what you are doing?
I guess we have about 500 staff and about 40. And so a great deal of work in terms of facilitating resettlement of vulnerable refugees to third countries. We also met in a number of countries, and there the lockdown in many of these countries prevented our staff from being able to receive the refugees and the migrants to be helped in our offices, and also from going out to do home visits. So it meant that we really had to reorient ourselves, and we worked very hard to make sure that we were able to provide remote help. And one advantage today is that many of displaced people have cell phones, and so they could at least be able to be in touch with us through their phones. But it's not the same as really reaching out to them in a personal interview or a personal visit. So our staff worked very hard with that. From headquarters, I met with them frequently, tried to encourage them because it was such a different way of working for them as well, and also tried to support them in their own fears about infection. We then also, we operate clinics on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Many of those refugees have been in that area in the camps for 40 years. So 2 or 3 generations have grown up in those camps. We wound up being the only medical services for both the refugees and the local populations at that time, since many of the government clinics closed down and encouraged us to be open. So that meant a lot of extra encouragement for our staff and a lot more worry for me that I was encouraging them to stay with the refugees because I knew that they were at risk then of becoming infected themselves. And then we have a special program, this might be interesting to Dr. Cynthia as well, with Rohingya refugees in Malaysia. And there, again, we couldn't go to their homes any longer, but these refugees have been victims of sexual and gender-based violence.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually even developed some training for keeping peace in the home, hoping that that would protect them from the violence that they had been subjected to in the past, sometimes by their own spouses. Those are the kinds of things, new, different things that we had to work on. Now things are beginning to open up. And we're grateful to be able to be back in the field. One big problem for us was a program we have in Jordan where we actually have cash assistance for the refugees to pay their rent, to buy food. And because of the lockdown, we couldn't even give them the cash, and yet there was no way, they had no bank accounts, so there was no way we could transfer the money to them.
Speaking of this, I mean, is there going to be a permanent improvement, do you think, with the challenge, the crucible that the pandemic has presented you with, that you think is going to have a lasting effect for that? So when you're talking about the situation in Jordan right now, if we're moving more into a cashless society, that might be something that can just help refugees and their ability to have the resources for purchases in the future. Are there other elements that you think are going to be permanent improvements because you're forced to innovate with what you do?
Well, first of all, on the cashless society, many refugees and migrants are not in a cashless society.
Right.
So, and we have been, I've been in touch with a lot of the technological people, businesses, and we are looking at the possibility of their being able to transfer money, say, at a 7-Eleven shop with their cell phones rather than have a bank account, because most of them cannot have a bank account. But I'm trained as a psychiatric social worker, so I believe that, you know, we won't have improvements by distancing ourselves. We really need the contact with the people, and they need the contact with us. And so this is something that I don't think we could overcome, and yet we are facing a public health emergency. Also, when you talk about, distancing, most refugees and migrants don't have the option of distancing. Distance. I mean, in one of the camps where we used to work, you had anywhere between 10 people living in a space that was like a parking space. So, this is not a possibility. They're still at risk. We cannot use our Western, Northern ideas for people who are living in these circumstances.
Speaking of this potential issue with the psychological imprint that will be left that I posed to Dr. Cynthia, what would you say with your platform so that people can transcend that hang up that they may have of the other that is going to have contact with them? How can we possibly find a way to still have that contact when people may be fearful about opening them up, particularly if we're going to be in a period of 2 years told to social distance from others?
Well, first of all, I think that we need to reinforce the public health in education and the real facts about the transmission of this virus, so that hand washing is one of the major means of preventing the spread. And then also having some physical distance when that's possible to do. Wearing masks as well, even though I was on 2 expert WHO working groups on this, and we had great debates, with the scientists about whether the masks were effective or not. But it seems like they can at least protect you from transmitting to someone else. And so that's an important step ahead too. So I think these simple steps are necessary. And then it's a typical way of handling epidemics of this type is to make sure that we test people And then we also trace their contacts, and you isolate those people. But instead, we went into a lockdown of the world, and because the pandemic had advanced so far that we could do nothing else. And I think we have to go back to the basic public health approach to do this. And that's why it's so important now in second waves throughout the world, try to go back to the classic way of handling these epidemics.
Thank you, Monsignor. Thank you. Both of you have inspired people, through your actions, through your spirits, through your energy. And I'm wondering if, particularly for the audience that has joined us today, why should people work in the nonprofit sector beyond just the sense of the purpose that drives both of you? So if you're thinking just about making an impact and other possible skills that can be taken from this experience in the nonprofit sector. Dr. Cynthia?
Yeah, while we are talking about security and inequality, I would like to focus on the equal opportunity. This includes for women and girls. And I came from a community and a country where people think women performance and education is less than those of men. Being in my professional journey, I realized that women always have to work harder to prove that we are capable. In addition, helping women and girls in providing essential services to them in a non-discriminatory environment, I believe women being a leadership role play a big part. I would like the women and girls in our community and culture see that we can be brave, we can be successful in our jobs, our home, and our negotiations. We can excel in more than one job, and we can be the effective leaders. So that make the young people to be mobilized and to work with the nonprofit organizations.
Dr. Cynthia, you have a huge staff that is helping you with your clients and patients. What percentage of them right now are female?
We have teachers, we have health worker and social worker. So in our senior management level, and almost 60–70% are women. But as you may aware that in the culture also women are more taking part in the social work, like health worker, teacher. So during those periods, many women being trained to be the midwife, teachers. So they are actively engaged in the community services, and as well as they become gradually they become a leadership role.
And since you founded your clinic, have you noticed a dramatic change in female leadership and you taking a role in developing new programs in your organization?
Yeah, in our context, the emergence of civil society and community-based nonprofit organization give hope for our young people to be the meaningful participation in the rebuilding the communities, and also improve the opportunity for themselves and for others to bring positive change to their life and their communities. I'm very happy and encouraged to see that our young people today are becoming more interested in joining the humanitarian and development works, and being proud of their work and hopeful for the positive change for the countries. And also they are climbing up to the social ladder. So this over the past 10 years, what we have been seeing is the growth of the civil society and the connection each other, and thus and recognizing each other role, and then making more proactive response to the community which deserve for the leadership. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Monsignor, I remember one time a sports coach was trying to recruit players that had higher caliber, and this was a program that didn't have a good record. And he would say to the potential recruits, why would you want to join the championship team when you can actually have a legacy and create a championship team with us? And then within a couple of years, that team was winning championships, and he was really appealing to people's legacies. And if you're out there trying to recruit the most talented of the generation that's on this session with us, how can you appeal to them to join public service and to join the nonprofit and to follow in the footsteps of you and Dr. Cynthia?
Well, first of all, I think the nonprofits are the champion league, and because they're serving people, and I also think in terms of why people would want to especially, I think there's a lot more direct contact with people than when you get into a political situation or a governmental situation or a business situation. They're hierarchies. I come from the Catholic Church where it's a hierarchical church, but I can tell you there's a lot more active interchange with the leaders in religious organizations than there are in the military or the government or the businesses. And so I think if you want that kind of direct experience, the nonprofit field is the place to do it. And then you also see the good that goes on, and you avoid some of the political issues. At one point in my work, when I was working in Rome in the late 90s, the early 90s, I was seconded by our organization to work with UNICEF and the government of Romania to reorient and retrain child protection system there, because everyone found these terrible institutions for children that were worse than the Dickens novels were. And so I was involved at that high level of the government and also the international organization UNICEF. UNICEF's a great organization, but I found more worries about people's careers there, about the privileges they should have, about what level of diplomatic status they could have. And the same thing in the government. The government in Romania had just gone to a so-called democratic model, but it changed every 3 months. And so I saw how in nonprofit organizations, there's a lot more consistency and many, many more opportunities for young people to get experience and to then build up that kind of experience and skill in an active way. So I think this is an important thing. I just wanted also to say something, Dr. Cynthia, I agree everything that she said about, especially I was trained in social work, so the majority of people in this profession are women, and I learned so much in working with them. At the same time, we had an experience in our organization where we had to look for inclusion of men. And this was exactly in the Malaysia program, in our Rohingya refugee program, where we're helping the survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. We put together a refugee protection corps. And so they were the first line. They responded to the hotlines for us. They accompanied the refugees for treatment, and they went and made sure they were doing okay and they were safe in their residences. And at first, we only accepted women because of the terrible things that many men did to those women. And yet we began very slowly, very carefully, with a lot of good training, accepting a few men. And when I went to visit, that they changed their own behavior and influenced their local community of the kind of work that they were doing. So I think we also have to make sure that we're including men problems. And that's, I think, another thing that we have to pay attention to when we're looking to be inclusive in the kind of work we do and the opportunities we give to young people.
Monsignor, I want to piggyback on something that you said, and I'll also throw this to Dr. Cynthia right after your answer. But are there specific skills or experiences that you think are most connected to work in the nonprofit sector that will prepare this young generation to deal with the really volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, that you think, okay, this is a skill or this is an experience that you're really only going to be able to obtain working in the field of public service and nonprofit work?
Two things. One is we have to know how to listen. And I'm not sure that's something that you could be trained to do, but I think you have to make sure that you understand when you're going into it that you don't have all the answers, and that the answers really come from the people themselves who are experiencing this, and they're much more resilient and much more creative than many of us who are privileged and don't have to think too hard or work too hard at times to find solutions to our problems. So to listen, and then also to learn. And that opens you up to an amazing world to witness the strength of people, whose lives, they had to flee, many of them, because they were threatened in their lives, or who faced abject poverty and no opportunities. And so they left everything because they were firm that they needed to make sure that they and their children and their spouses had another hope for the future. I think these are the things that many times when we go to help people, we think we're solving the problems. The most we could do many times is for us to realize the strengths of the people and help them to realize them, to empower themselves.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Monsignor.
Yep.
Dr. Cynthia?
Yeah, I believe that engaging in nonprofit or humanitarian work can nurture the young people empathy and the sense of urgency in taking actions to solve social problems around them. And young people can also cultivate important value for their professional careers, such as accountability, responsibility, and partnership while working with nonprofit organizations. And while working with nonprofit organizations, which usually have a broad network of, and then also young people can improve their cross-cultural understanding and the cross-sectoral partnership skill, becoming more responsive to the context while maintaining flexibility and adaptability in their professional setting.
Thank you. If I can ask one final question before we move into questions from the audience. If you had to look back as you were embarking on your career, is there advice that you would give that 20-something version of yourself now knowing what you know today? Because I think that that's something that I really would want to get your advice, and this is my backhanded way of doing this. So Monsignor, we'll start with you. What would you kind of do over again, or what would you say, hey, this is the same decision I'm making and with the benefit of hindsight?
I don't think I would do over again so much. I think I would be much less worried about what the next step was, whether I had the skills or not, and I think I'd be more comfortable in just entering into the experiences. Obviously, I also needed to have training, and I'm grateful for the education that I had in many different areas of life. But I think I would be more comfortable with entering into the new experiences. And as I said, all of the things that I planned to do didn't work out, and God, in sense of humor or in a divine plan, that I, even though I'm trained in theology, I didn't have any idea that this was playing out. I think to God to plan once again for me.
Well, I'm really curious now. Let's go back to that 20-something version of yourself. What would he have been most surprised by in the trajectory of your career? What would have been something that you just would not have believed if it said, okay, this is 2020, this is what's happened in the grand sweep of what you've done?
Well, first of all, I don't know, you sound like you have an American accent. I don't know if you're from the United States, but I am from the United States, and there's a saying there that, join the Navy and see the world. I joined the church. I wasn't planning to see the world, and I have been gifted with, really a depth of experience that I couldn't plan, and, I really didn't have the skills to bring to it either. But, this kind of experience, Dr. Cynthia talked about a multicultural experience. And there too, I needed to learn those cultures, respect them, not always feel comfortable in some of the cultural situations I was in, but I grew through that. And that's the other thing. I think we have to allow ourselves to be taken over by these experiences. Some of them are very, very hard, and that we don't the kind of pain that you have to be willing to touch. But at the same time, when you touch that pain with people, you also can experience their joy at, having a new hope and a new future.
Speaking of touch, Dr. Cynthia, you are improving the lives of almost 100,000 people that are coming to you in your clinic every single year. It's staggering to think of the impact that you are having. Is that something that you thought was possible when you were founding your clinic? And what do you think really contributed to this tremendous impact that you've been able to have?
Yeah, when I fled to the border or Thailand, I never thought I would end up in Thailand for 30 years, and I can return to my home country in 3 months. But actually, when we start seeing the humanitarian crisis on the border, there are people who are really need to work together, and then many people who would like to help their own community. So many women join our training program. They become community health workers, and currently most of our staff or the midwife or the health worker who we have been trained more than 3,000 health worker working with both internal displaced community and also in the migrant community. So they were trained appropriately based on their context, so they can reach out to the women where they cannot access to basic and antenatal care, family planning. And then now more and more women, every year we monitor improving access to basic maternity care, and then we can improve access to emergency obstetric. Also, we can set up the referral system. So the health community health system already stronger and in place. So we work with different ethnic community who are suffering from the war and then poverty. So the women and the young people themselves, they take initiative role in building the community health system in their own community. So they reach out to many community already. So the impact is they can save a lot of women's life, and then save the baby life, as well as the young children and women can be protected, and people become more aware on active participation in the building the community network for protection of women and children.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia. If it's okay with both of you, I'd like to move on to some of the brilliant questions that we've received from our audience today. And the first one comes from Maria, and it's actually about motivation. And so to paraphrase her question is that, at many nonprofit organizations, there aren't so many senior leadership positions. And so when you're thinking about advancing your career and there might not be a place to essentially ascend to when it comes to your responsibility and your portfolio as a leader, how do you keep motivation? How do you inspire yourself to keep working for the cause when there might not be a professional advancement?
Yeah, firstly, to advance your work, you need more and more friends to work with you. That means not only you are also working with your colleagues, and then you have to continue support, supervise, and then making as a working team. So this make everybody participate in improving the services, quality of services, and then taking more responsibility. So that make everybody keep motivation. At the same time, we can see there are many community leaders and stakeholders who are really sympathize and working and supporting the work of the community organization or nonprofit organization. So we need to have more connection with the stakeholder, and then we need to continue advocate for the cause. So we can see that there are some changes in the policy level, and like for example, while we are studying deliver baby, the parents who don't have legal documents cannot access the birth registration. But in 2008, the Thai government improved the law for birth registration. So regardless of the parent status, the children can access birth registration. So through working together with the human rights lawyer and the community leaders, and the policy change can be advancing. And then also, especially for the child protection, also before that, we in our community and country in Burma, it is grow up with the situation, the children being not very, it's only the children who are in the city can access for education. Now in the migrant community, even they cannot enroll in the Thai government official school, but they allow to operate the like flexible learning opportunity, and then they can get enroll with the non-formal education accreditation. So the children, the migrant or refugee children, even they are not legally or registered in Thailand, they can still get education, and then they are the protection and the career pathway being open. So the changes in the policy also make people motivated.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Monsignor, how do we retain that spark?
Well, I think first of all, we need to rethink what advancement. Too many times we think that advancement is going up to the managerial post, and I realize I don't have a right to speak about this because I'm a chief executive officer of a large organization, but many times I look back and I got much more gratification and felt in many ways I was accomplishing more when I had that kind of direct service with people, or was working in a team, instead of being the person who's responsible for everything and therefore has to make final decisions. So I think that's something, and I think the COVID-19 experience has helped us understand that a little bit. Who are the essential workers right now? There are many of the people that we thought had low-level jobs, and we paid them very little, and we gave them very little recognition. And yet they were the ones who had to really keep the world going when it was closed down for everybody else to keep safe. So I think, we need to assess our values and our understanding of what advancement is. And then also really get the kind of positive feedback that you can from what you're doing right now. And then I think the opportunities open up if that's the best thing for you to do.
Yeah. A follow-up question to this. Do you think that one of the issues that we have, and this isn't just necessarily at nonprofit organizations, is that someone excels in a certain role and then we feel like we have to promote them out of that role? So I come from the university world, and I think one of the reasons why universities aren't well governed is you take the best researcher and then you make them the president of the university running a $1 billion organization, and yet they're a scholar of the Italian Renaissance. Do you have advice about how we can go about improving the governance of our organizations when it comes to recruiting entry-level workers, but then also when it comes to governing these organizations? Anything in your experience, if you had a magic wand, this is what you would change generally about how we govern nonprofit organizations?
For myself, I wound up studying both the psychiatric social work and management at the same time. And I kind of discounted the management part. I was told to study it, I did it. And I think I did okay with learning, but I'm now very grateful since I did move into management. I get more gratification about what I did before, but I'm glad that I did learn those skills because they are different skills, and it's not always the best answer simply to so-called graduate up people who are expert in another field. And so I think you have to, if you are in that position of moving into management and you haven't had the training, then you need to get it. Because there are very different criteria that you need to employ and skills that you need to employ if you're going to make some major decisions around running an organization, and not simply in delivering the services or other activities that the organization has been founded for.
This next question is about, this comes from Emma, and it's essentially, the reputation that nonprofits may have when it comes to technology and marketing, that they might not be as technologically savvy or as slick as for-profit organizations. What can nonprofits do to improve their ability when they face forward to those that may want to work for the organization, or those that may want to donate or volunteer their time to assist the causes that you all are fighting every day for?
In our situation, while we are working with the refugees, there are different kind of refugees on the border area. So some of those who fled to Thailand are living in the refugee camp status, but there are a lot more migrant workers who are undocumented or forcibly displaced. So in the refugee camp, there are already existing like international NGOs. So through the network, we can able to access some international volunteers. So Metal Clinic have been receiving the international volunteer and the technical support from and all over the world, like many university students, they also want to come and learn about the border health. So Metal Clinic now become like a training center and learning center for the university as well, because the border health is the border is very unique. People are moving back and forth, and then people who don't have legal documents or stateless, but anyway, they are contributing the economy of the Thailand. So providing essential services for these people, and then making sure that these people are also always include in the strategy for promotion of the economy or healthcare is very important. So in this situation, what we can see for improving the services is working together with the international partner as well. And the government also need to like understand and learn about more migration, and also provide the support. So that means that the economic for the local community or economic for the country, in both countries will be benefit for providing essential care services for these people. So continue research on the migration, and then improving the quality of services for healthcare, education, and protection is the essential part of our advocacy through doing the research and advocacy work.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. Monsignor, any improvements, speaking of our role as advocates in the nonprofit realm, that you think would be really helpful going forward?
Yes, I think first of all, we need to depend on the people who are well trained on communications and on technology. When I took over the organization that I lead right now, and I looked at our website, it looked like a whole bunch of reports that you send to the UN agencies and the governments that fund you, and they just kind of put them up on the website. I was not interested in reading that. You know, I have to read it before they get sent out to those funders. But we completely revised our website to feature the people that we're working with and to make sure their stories get told. And a similar experience, we just completed a whole cycle, a 2-year cycle of doing research on migrant workers throughout the world. And we had professional research organizations do that research for us. But when it came time to deciding on the reports, I decided we would have two. One was the professional results of the research projects, but the other one is a photojournalism book where we're looking at the people and featuring them as people, not as migrants, but as real people, and talking about their hopes and dreams and giving their own testimony about why they migrated and what happened. Did it fulfill what they were looking for? Did it not? What were the challenges they faced? And so I think that's the other thing we need to do. A lot of times we look at professional research. I'm not putting that down. I think, again, with COVID-19, we found out how much we need to make sure we have a scientific base for what we say and do. But at the same time, we need to look at the people and hear their experiences and what they think could solve some of these bigger problems in the world.
The next question comes from Leo, and he is a master's student right now, looking to enter into the nonprofit field, particularly in human development, humanitarian services. And there is a bit of a struggle to find good information about how he can get a paid internship, how he can get a full-time job in this sector. And I also want to add on to Leo's question is, I'm coming right out of school. How can I be attractive to work for either one of you, right? So if I want to live in Switzerland, or I want to be in Thailand and work for the Mai Tai clinic, how do I make this happen? How can I put the best impression upon either one of you?
So every organization, nonprofit organization, are struggling for like a sustainability, organizational sustainability. So not only providing the service, how we growing through the network or strengthening partnership. So Mentor Clinic have different community organization network, both in education and healthcare, and how we are, since we are very unique situation, how we work, because we are not registered in Thailand, but we are working with the migrant refugees population for 30 years with support from the Thai community, as well as working with the government. So this unique position make more very attractive for our international volunteers. And also to work with the non-profit organization and the community organization make a sense of ownership, because how you see all the people who working with the organization, they come from the same life experience with the beneficiary, like children or women. So everybody have the same story. They flee from the fighting. So listen to the story of the health worker teacher, how they are motivated and how they become the leader in the community. It's also very attractive for the community or for the volunteer as well. Also, it is a lot to learn for the international community, that the border is very unique. How can you improve access the cross-border population, and how the policy, the government, two government policy, ensure that these people don't need to be neglected and inclusive in the development network. So these all are like when people are study about the international development. So this always need to consider about how the cross-border issue need to be addressed through cross-border collaboration between not only government to government, also community to community.
Thank you. So Monsignor, how are we finding the information? How can I get that job with you? And then lastly, just to close things down, any particular things that you specifically are very hopeful about for the future of nonprofit work?
Well, like Dr. Cynthia, I have to start out by talking about the struggle for sustainability for nonprofits. And probably, I don't want to be flippant, but probably, you know, someone said, how can you help me get this paid internship, or how can you hire me? I'd have to say, you have to help me raise the money so that I could do that, you know, right now. And again, I'm not looking for a job, so I know that it's really very, very hard, and I have to be sensitive to that. But I think, you know, there are a number of things. First of all, in some universities, I don't know about URASAM, but I know we're working with some universities where they've had endowments and they're able to help the students be able to come for an international experience, learn a lot, do very valuable activities, but that they could supply the living expenses and the possibility of the student being able to come overseas. That is great. I know many students don't have that advantage, but I think it is something that you know, that's helpful if they could access that. The other thing is that I think we also, again, have to reevaluate what we're looking for. You know, I'll give you an example. We have a lot of safe spaces that we have in our programs in Jordan, in Malaysia, in Pakistan. And there, a lot of times, the refugees themselves could get involved. Sometimes they can't even work, as Dr. Cynthia mentioned as well, and in the country where they've sought asylum. But we could give them valuable experiences, and then sometimes have the resources to be able to help them with travel or with meals and things like that. And yet, they're doing a very, very important service, both for the other refugees, but also for themselves in restoring their own dignity and understanding their own worth. So again, I think we have to reevaluate what we want and what we're looking for. At the same time, I think, you know, there are great experiences for students and for people just coming out of work. They have to stick to it. I mean, I remember not so long ago, a young man with whom I had been on a webinar called me and said, now I really want to move into international work. how could I do it? I couldn't offer him something because I didn't have a budget to do it, but I mentioned several other possibilities, and he's now able to do that in an international organization. He thanked me for giving him the ideas to pursue, but he also had the resilience and the stick-to-itiveness to be able to find something.
Fantastic. I want to thank both of you for giving us your time. I'm in the field of education and in the nonprofit sector, and I like to try to look at the Latin roots of the word education in English, and it comes from educare or educare, and one means to train or to mold, and the other one means to lead out. And so one of my arguments about education is that you have to train yourself to get outside of yourself. And I think both of your careers in service, you have done an absolutely majestic job about serving others and getting outside of just your own experience to be able to be effective advocates and stewards and healers. And so I want to thank you for sharing that rich experience with us today. I want to thank the Future Studio for this convening power that they exercised. And I hope everybody in the audience benefited from the rich wisdom that we had from Dr. Cynthia and Monsignor Robert. Thank you so much, and we look forward to the next time to be able to speak with everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye now.